Hey everyone and welcome. Today we'll run you through an analysis of a Faker game where he roamed often and did it pretty much to perfection, where we will all be able to learn something. This time he was on Taliyah, but even if you don't play Taliyah or even a strong roaming champion, you will learn a few tricks to identify how to roam perfectly without taking any risk. Let's get to it. This time he's versus a Ryze in Top Korean Challenger. In this matchup, both champions do around even damage if they both land a full combo. However, Ryze has lower CD abilities, so he'll have more opportunities to trade than the Taliyah. For wave clear, before Ryze buys his tier, Taliyah has the edge, since Ryze would just if he tries to match. However, once Ryze buys a tier, their wave clear is about even. For range, Taliyah has a bit of an advantage, but with Ryze's movement speed, it will be about even in trades. Now with this information in mind, it's time to build a game plan. So Taliyah's game plan this time, as we know, is to roam. To do this, she'll want to push the wave and then look for roaming opportunities every time that she pushes. But let's talk about why this is the game plan that Faker is choosing, and how you can make the correct choice in your own game. Since, although it is a Taliyah, she could easily win lane versus a whole bunch of champions via not roaming and staying in lane. It's correct to roam this time because Ryze has point and click crowd control and he's playing with the Lee Sin this game, so gank pressure is very high. It would be really hard for Taliyah to win lane without exposing herself to ganks, and much easier to leave the lane and find leads elsewhere. However, if Taliyah was against a weaker laner like a Malzahar, Corki or Diana, laners who are so weak that they have to take teleports or just melee champions, then staying in lane and winning that way would often be the correct choice. So this time, since this lane is not easy to win, Faker decides to play the roam game. Let's jump right in. Faker helps his team fend off a scouted red steal at the start, and then he gets to lane a couple of seconds late because of it. Not a big deal, and now he also knows that Lee Sin will for sure start topside right away. As he approaches the wave, he actively auto-attacks the minions to push. You may grow tired of us talking about this, but when you want to push, you need to utilize your autos, since we know for a fact that most players do not do this enough, which weakens their push dramatically compared to someone who is constantly auto-attacking. As his Q comes back, he fires it onto the melees, the casters, and on Ryze. The first thing that takes damage from Taliyah Q takes full damage, so he hits 3 different things to get full damage 3 times. This is Taliyah specific, but regardless of what champion you play, there will always be an optimal way to wave clear, and consistency will give you the edge when pushing, even if you don't actually have more wave clear than your opponent. Anyway, let's speed it up until this wave is cleared. Now the first wave is cleared, what would you do in this situation as Taliyah? Since Faker is against a hard crowd control gank lane in mid, Faker decides to go and scout out what the Lee Sin is up to. He knows that Lee started topside and it's just 1 minute 51 into the game. He can safely deep ward the enemy jungle before Lee Sin gets to bot side. Let's take a look. As he places the ward, let's toggle off Fog of War and we can see that Lee Sin is at his wolves. We questioned our research group who played between Silver and Platinum about where they thought Lee would be at this exact moment. And nearly everyone we asked did guess correctly that Lee would be clearing wolves right now. So why should you care about what our research group guessed? Well, most players lose track of the enemy jungler in game because they don't think about where they are throughout the laning phase. When prompted to actually think about where Lee likely is, it's pretty easy to know what camp he'll be clearing early on if he scouted where they started. Because Faker is thinking about this, he got a deep ward at the perfect time, which was risk-free, and we'll see how it pays off in just a moment. He comes back to lane and continues pushing. At 2 minutes 20, he spots Lee Sin with a great ward that he placed earlier and knows that he's now doing red buff. He continues clearing the wave, staying back and not looking for any type of trade with Ryze, just pushing as fast as he can to continue claiming lane priority. Now that the wave is cleared, Faker is once again pathing towards bot side river, but why? Well, this is where that earlier ward really comes into effect and we can't stress enough how important it is to track the enemy jungler, especially if your game plan is to roam, since you never want to run into them unintentionally. By pathing through bot side river, he's simply scouting where Lee Sin is. With the ward that he had placed earlier, it enables him to activate a process of elimination. Lee Sin would just have cleared red, and he isn't at Raptors. That means that he's either killing Scuttle, clearing Krugs, or looking for an early cheese on either mid or bot. The early cheese mid is unlikely, since Ryze is pulling back here to CS, and bot lane doesn't have very good initiation, so it's most likely that Lee Sin isn't wasting his time and is either clearing Scuttle or Krugs. Faker confidently paths towards Scuttle and confirms his location. This information is super valuable, since his bot lane now knows to play safe, top lane knows that he can push and play aggressive, and his jungler knows exactly where he is, so he can go and steal top lane camps or gank top without any risk. Faker's helped himself and his team by proactively scouting the enemy jungler. Now, you may have some doubts about executing this in your own games, which we'll talk about in a moment, but first, let's find out what happens next. He clears this wave and starts assessing his options. He's not trading with Ryze at all, since he wants to stay healthy to roam, and an opportunity is presenting itself topside. He saw Lee Sin around 40 seconds ago, so where do you think that Lee Sin is now? Well, he'll most likely be doing either of his two remaining bot side camps. Toggling off the fog, we can see that he's doing Krugs. Because Faker scouted Lee earlier, his jungler and top laner knows that they can bully this Jax to his turret and potentially look for an uncontested dive. Alright, so Jax just lost a huge wave and died. This was all enabled by Faker tracking the Lee Sin so well early on. They all knew that Jax wouldn't receive any help from the jungler, and Faker has been clearing the wave more quickly than the Ryze, so he can't follow this either. This play was 100% going to work out, which is exactly what you want, in order to consistently win your games. If Faker had gone for this roam without any knowledge of the Lee so far, it wouldn't have been a 100% play, and he could have ran into Lee on his way up, which as we know can ruin your tempo and lose you the early game. So let's address some of the doubts that you may have about executing this type of play in your own elo. The first thing that you may have been thinking all the way back to where Faker scouted Lee on the Scuttle is that lower elo junglers are less predictable and often aren't doing what they should be doing. Faker paths straight for the river because he has a great idea of how long it takes Lee to do the red buff, and he strongly suspected that he would be doing Scuttle or Krugs. If you're not so sure about the jungler doing what you suspect him to be doing, then taking a safer path like this to achieve the same thing is recommended, so that you don't potentially walk into an early brush cheese. Remember, your opponent's movements will often give away whether you're being camped, since if they're playing passive, chances are the jungler won't be in this brush waiting for you. Secondly, you probably have serious doubts about whether scouting the jungler would trigger your teammates to make a play on the opposite side of the map, as we saw here. That's a valid concern, and a 2-man gank without the Olaf probably wouldn't have landed the kill in this situation. However, depending on the matchup, 2-man plays can work in a similar situation if you and your top laner have good lockdown and their top laner was pushing instead of being pushed. Or by making an easy play bot side with a high engaged support can score you results without the help from your jungler as well. Either way, regardless of if you go for a roam, the fact that you are being proactive about scouting the jungler and feeding your team information will give you the confidence to roam safely and decrease the chance of your teammates getting caught off guard by ganks. Alright, now that we've deep dived into the nuances that built up and executed this successful roam, let's find out how Faker played this out moving forward. At 421, he sees Lee topside, now doing Grump. He recalls, shoves, and then does a loop through the river. This is a small thing, but whenever you shove a wave, try to leave vision so that you're constantly pressuring your opponents with the threat of potentially roaming. He spots Lee topside again and keeps shoving, avoiding trades to keep his health high, and drops out of vision once again, this time clearing a ward. He left lane vision to the bot side brush this time, so he doesn't run into Lee, who he knows is top side. But unfortunately, Lee made a play top, and now Faker isn't in a position to head up there for a room. Not only is he out of position, but he doesn't actually have lane priority right now since the waves are neutral. So he will give this room a pass and push for the next wave. After pushing the next wave, a fight does break out. Topside again, and he's faster with the push, so he roams there first with his ultimate. After picking up a nice kill, they take an unfortunate fight where they die due to Olaf being alongside a questionable flash. After respawning, here are their scores with the Ryze having a slight gold lead. Faker comes back to lane and is gifted a freebie onto Lee Sin from this jungle trade. Then he shoves a wave and steals Raptors while Lee Sin is dead. Even though Faker isn't necessarily getting super far ahead of the Ryze here, he's making Lee's life miserable by revealing his position and arriving to fights first. To wrap it up, Faker clears out this wave after getting blue buff and then recalls, while Ryze collects his own blue. Faker is vigilant about Ryze going for his own roam since he's not in lane right now. He knows that Ryze is likely going topside after doing his blue, and since he's MIA, he starts preemptively pathing topside. Once again, ruining Lee Sin's day by constantly arriving to his early game plays and scoring kills. When all was said and done, Faker finished up 14-2-7 with the Ryze 6-5-3. Olaf snowballed way harder than the Lee Sin in this game because of the pressure that Faker applied to not only win his lane, but snowball his other laners early on. Let's get you today's takeaways. By identifying the enemy jungler's starting position, he knew that Lee would start topside. He then got the early shove with proactive auto attacks and efficient wave clear, and then dropped an early ward to scout Lee Sin's arrival to the bot side. With this scouting information, he made a high percentage assumption that Lee was on scuttle after clearing red. He then pathed bot to confirm his suspicions. This fed his team all the information they need to deal with Lee Sin's early game, and allowed Faker to make a play topside with a dive onto Jax, putting him very far behind. As the lane went on, Faker ensured that he stayed healthy in lane via not trading and focusing on wave clear. After shoving each wave, he always did something, whether it was roaming, getting out of vision, clearing wards, or scouting the enemy jungler. With his proactive information gathering and strong wave clear, he always arrived to the fights first and made Lee's life difficult with the pressure that he constantly applied. Now there are of course things that we didn't have time to talk about in this video for how to execute roams. We'll be sure to keep addressing this stuff over time with our system, and we'll be looking to add more roaming and macro videos as we move forward, so look out for those. That brings us to the end of this video. Have any questions that you want answered? Join the discussion below. Thanks for watching.